You think school lunches in the 1970s were just mystery meat and canned vegetables? Think again. America's cafeteria ladies created some of the most resourceful and surprisingly delicious institutional cooking this country has ever seen. Let's dig into 30 school cafeteria recipes from the 1970s they'll never serve again. Porcupine meatballs earned their name from the rice mixed into ground beef that poked through the surface like tiny quills after baking. Cafeteria ladies mixed ground beef with uncooked rice, minced onion, salt, and pepper, then formed them into balls and smothered them in tomato sauce before baking. The magic happened as the rice absorbed tomato juices and expanded, creating meatballs that were moist and tender while stretching the meat budget further than any administrator expected. Schools loved this recipe because rice was cheap and 1 pound of ground beef could feed twice as many students. Children lined up eagerly because the tomato sauce turned sweet and sticky during the long bake, coating each meatball in glossy red sauce that tasted like comfort. These weren't gourmet creations, but they were honest food made with care by women who understood that hungry children needed substance. Porcupine meatballs represented cafeteria ingenuity at its finest. Rectangular school pizza became the iconic lunch that defined cafeteria culture throughout the decade. Unlike round pizzeria pies, these pizzas were baked on massive sheet pans and cut into perfect squares that fit neatly onto compartmentalized lunch trays. The crust was thick, doughy, and slightly chewy, with a golden bottom from being baked directly on greased aluminum. Cafeteria workers spread tomato sauce from industrial cans across the dough, then covered it with mozzarella and commodity cheese that turned bubbly and brown in commercial ovens. The cheese had a particular stretchiness that regular pizza couldn't match, pulling into long strings when students bit into their squares. Friday Pizza Day was sacred, and children who forgot their lunch money suffered genuine disappointment. The recipe was simple, but execution required timing and institutional knowledge passed between cafeteria veterans. Rectangular school pizza created its own category of comfort that generations still remember fondly. Salmon croquettes appeared on cafeteria menus when budget constraints required creative protein solutions during the middle of the month. Canned salmon was mashed with crushed saltine crackers, beaten eggs, and minced onion until the mixture held together enough to form into oval patties. These patties were dredged in cracker crumbs and fried until golden brown and crispy outside while staying moist and flaky within. The salmon flavor was mild and slightly sweet. Nothing like fresh fish, but comforting in its own institutional way. Cafeteria ladies served them with tartar sauce and often paired them with creamed peas or macaroni salad. Children either loved or hated salmon croquettes, with little middle ground, but those who loved them remembered the crispy exterior giving way to tender fish inside. The recipe stretched expensive protein into affordable portions while providing genuine nutrition. Salmon croquettes represented practical cooking wisdom that prioritized feeding children well. American chop suey was the cafeteria's answer to Italian-Chinese fusion decades before fusion cuisine became trendy. Elbow macaroni was boiled until tender, then mixed with seasoned ground beef browned with onions and green peppers in massive tilting skillets. Tomato sauce and a blend of spices, including oregano and garlic powder, brought everything together into a hearty one-pot meal that could serve hundreds of students. The dish had nothing to do with actual Chinese cooking, but its name suggested exotic origins that made it seem more interesting than simple beef and pasta. Schools across New England particularly embraced this recipe, serving it weekly throughout fall and winter months. The combination of protein, starch, and vegetables in one serving made it nutritionally complete and easy to portion. Cafeteria ladies could prepare enormous batches in advance and keep them warm in steam tables for hours without quality loss. American chop suey was cafeteria efficiency at its finest. Turkey tetrazzini transformed Thanksgiving leftovers into a creamy casserole that students actually requested by name. Cubed turkey was folded into cooked spaghetti, along with sliced mushrooms and a rich sauce made from butter, flour, milk, and chicken broth. The mixture was poured into deep hotel pans, topped with parmesan and breadcrumbs, then baked until golden and bubbling around the edges. The sauce became silky during baking, clinging to every strand of pasta and piece of turkey. What made this dish special was how it elevated ordinary ingredients into something almost elegant for a school cafeteria. The mushrooms added earthiness, the parmesan contributed sharpness, and the breadcrumb topping provided textural contrast. November and December menus featured turkey tetrazzini regularly as schools worked through commodity turkey supplies. Children who typically avoided casseroles made exceptions for this one, scraping their trays clean. Turkey tetrazzini proved institutional cooking could achieve genuine deliciousness. Cheeseburger pie turned the beloved American hamburger into a casserole that could feed entire classrooms from a single pan. Ground beef was browned with onions and seasoned with salt, pepper, and Worcestershire sauce, then spread across the bottom of baking dishes. A simple batter made from eggs, milk, flour, and baking powder was poured over the meat layer, creating a soft bread-like topping as it baked. Sliced American cheese was layered on top during the final minutes of baking, melting into a golden blanket that tied everything together. The result was somewhere between a burger, a biscuit, and a pot pie, satisfying multiple cravings simultaneously. Cafeteria ladies loved this recipe because it required no individual assembly and could be sliced into perfect portions. Students loved it because it delivered all the flavors they craved from cheeseburgers without the mess. Cheeseburger pie represented the creative problem-solving that defined school cafeteria cooking. Swedish meatballs arrived in cafeterias during a decade when Scandinavian cuisine briefly captured American imagination. These smaller, rounder meatballs were made from a mixture of ground beef and pork, combined with breadcrumbs soaked in milk, creating an exceptionally tender texture. The secret was the creamy gravy made from pan drippings, beef broth, and sour cream that coated each meatball in pale brown sauce. Cafeteria versions often substituted evaporated milk for sour cream to reduce costs, but the result remained surprisingly delicious. Students received portions of meatballs swimming in gravy alongside egg noodles or mashed potatoes that soaked up every drop of sauce. The dish felt sophisticated compared to typical cafeteria fare, introducing children to flavors beyond standard American cooking. Teachers often requested extra portions, recognizing quality when they tasted it. Swedish meatballs showed that school kitchens could execute international recipes when given proper ingredients. Fruit cocktail cake emerged as the dessert that proved cafeteria baking could compete with homemade versions. Canned fruit cocktail with its syrup was folded directly into yellow cake batter, creating pockets of sweet fruit throughout each slice. The cake baked up moist and tender, with the fruit settling slightly toward the bottom where it became jammy and caramelized against the pan. Some recipes called for a brown sugar and coconut topping that turned crunchy during baking, adding textural contrast to the soft crumb. Students looked forward to dessert days when fruit cocktail cake appeared, trading other items for extra squares of this surprisingly sophisticated sweet. The recipe used shelf-stable ingredients that schools could purchase in bulk and store indefinitely. Cafeteria bakers took pride in their fruit cocktail cakes, sometimes adding personal touches like nutmeg or vanilla. This cake represented the hidden talent within school kitchens and the genuine care that cafeteria workers brought to feeding children. Peanut butter bars satisfied the after-lunch sweet tooth while delivering protein that helped students focus through afternoon classes. A base layer of oats, flour, brown sugar, and butter was pressed into sheet pans and baked until golden. Creamy peanut butter was mixed with powdered sugar and softened butter to create a thick filling spread across the warm crust. The final layer of chocolate chips melted over warm peanut butter created a glossy, dark topping that firmed as it cooled. Cut into small squares, these bars were rich enough that modest portions satisfied completely. The combination of textures made eating them an experience requiring attention and appreciation. Schools could prepare massive batches that held well throughout lunch service without refrigeration. The ingredients were affordable and the recipe forgiving, allowing even inexperienced bakers to produce consistent results. Peanut butter bars became trading currency in cafeterias, with students offering milk cartons and fruit cups for extra squares. Creamed peas on toast represented the practical philosophy that defined Depression-era cooking carried forward into 70s cafeterias. Frozen peas were simmered in a white sauce made from butter, flour, and milk until the sauce thickened enough to coat a spoon. This creamy mixture was spooned generously over slices of white toast that had been lightly buttered and kept warm in steam tables. The toast absorbed the sauce gradually, creating layers of texture from crispy edges to soft, sauce-soaked centers. Some cafeterias added hard-boiled egg slices on top for additional protein and visual appeal. The dish looked simple, but delivered genuine comfort, especially on cold winter days when students needed warming from the inside. Teachers who remembered eating similar meals during their own childhoods often praised the cafeteria for keeping this tradition alive. Creamed peas on toast taught students that deliciousness didn't require complexity, and that vegetables could taste genuinely good when prepared with care. Hamburger gravy over mashed potatoes was the meal that proved cafeteria ladies understood comfort food better than any restaurant chef. Ground beef was browned in massive tilting skillets. Then flour was sprinkled over the meat and stirred until it absorbed the fat and juices. Milk or beef broth was added gradually while stirring constantly until a thick, creamy gravy formed around every crumble of meat. This savory mixture was ladled generously over mounds of mashed potatoes made from flakes reconstituted with butter and milk. The combination created a meal that satisfied on the deepest level, warming children from the inside out on cold school days. Students who cleaned their trays often returned for seconds when available, and the smell of browning beef drew them toward the lunch line before the bell rang. The recipe required minimal ingredients but maximum attention to technique, as lumpy gravy was considered unacceptable by proud cafeteria veterans. Hamburger gravy represented honest institutional cooking at its finest. Cheese zombies were the mysterious bread pockets that appeared under different names in cafeterias across America throughout the decade. Soft bread dough was wrapped around American cheese slices, sealed at the edges, and baked until golden brown and puffy. When students bit through the tender crust, melted cheese stretched in long strings that required careful navigation to avoid dripping onto shirts. The name varied by region, with some schools calling them cheese pockets or cheesy bread, but the concept remained consistent. These handheld treats required no utensils and could be eaten while walking to recess, making them popular with children who wanted to maximize playground time. Cafeteria workers could prepare hundreds in advance, freezing unbaked zombies for later use when schedules demanded quick solutions. The combination of soft bread and gooey cheese created a textural experience that students remembered decades later. Cheese zombies proved that simple combinations executed well could achieve legendary status in lunch. Fiestada Mexican pizza introduced countless American children to flavors beyond their family dinner tables throughout the 70s. These hexagonal treats featured a crispy, tortilla-like crust topped with seasoned ground beef, refried beans, and melted cheese that turned bubbly under commercial broilers. The beef was seasoned with cumin, chili powder, and garlic, creating an aroma that announced Mexican Pizza Day throughout school hallways. Unlike authentic Mexican food, fiestadas were designed for institutional efficiency, arriving frozen and requiring only reheating before service. Students loved the crispy edges that shattered when bitten and the stretchy cheese that connected each piece to their mouths. Some cafeterias added shredded lettuce and diced tomatoes after baking, while others kept them simple. The hexagonal shape made them distinctive and memorable, setting them apart from rectangular pizza squares served on other days. Fiestada represented the cafeteria's attempt to offer variety through food. Cafeteria goulash bore little resemblance to authentic Hungarian cooking, but became beloved comfort food in school lunchrooms nonetheless. Elbow macaroni was combined with ground beef, diced tomatoes, tomato sauce, and a blend of seasonings that varied by region and cook. The mixture simmered together until the pasta absorbed the tomato flavors and the meat distributed evenly throughout the pot. What distinguished goulash from American chop suey was often regional tradition rather than recipe differences, with Midwestern schools particularly attached to the goulash name. Served in deep compartments on lunch trays, the dish provided complete nutrition in a single portion that required only a spoon. Cafeteria ladies could prepare massive batches that held well in steam tables for extended service periods. Students who initially resisted the unfamiliar appearance often became devoted fans after the first bite revealed familiar flavors. Cafeteria goulash taught children that foods with strange names could still taste like home. Shepherd's pie arrived on cafeteria menus as a clever way to stretch ground beef while incorporating vegetables children might otherwise refuse. A layer of seasoned ground beef mixed with peas, carrots, and corn formed the base in large hotel pans. Mashed potatoes were spread thickly on top, then the surface was roughened with fork tines to create peaks that would brown attractively during baking. The assembled pies baked until the potato topping turned golden and the meat mixture bubbled up around the edges. Each portion delivered protein, starch, and vegetables in a single serving that satisfied both nutritional requirements and childhood appetites. The crispy potato peaks became the most sought-after bites, with students strategically cutting their portions to maximize crunchy edges. Cafeteria workers appreciated how shepherd's pie made vegetables acceptable to picky eaters who would reject the same peas and carrots served separately. This dish represented the institutional kitchen's mastery of disguising nutrition as pure comfort. Chicken fried steak patties brought Southern comfort food traditions into school cafeterias across the country during the decade. Thin beef patties were dredged in seasoned flour, dipped in egg wash, and coated again before being fried until golden brown and crispy. The double coating created a substantial crust that shattered satisfyingly when cut with the side of a fork. White pepper gravy made from pan drippings, flour, and milk was ladled generously over each patty, transforming them into something approaching restaurant quality. Students learned to pour gravy over their mashed potatoes as well, creating a unified plate of comfort. The patties arrived pre-formed and frozen, making preparation manageable for cafeteria staff who simply needed to bread and fry them fresh. Even children who claimed to dislike beef often made exceptions for chicken fried steak, won over by the crispy coating and creamy gravy. This dish proved that proper technique could elevate humble ingredients into something genuinely special. Corn dog nuggets were the bite-sized treats that made hot dogs exciting again for students tired of the same old frankfurters and buns. Hot dog pieces were dipped in sweet cornmeal batter and deep-fried until the coating puffed up golden and crispy around each morsel. The batter had a slight sweetness that complemented the salty, savory hot dog within, creating a flavor combination children found irresistible. Served with packets of mustard and ketchup for dipping, corn dog nuggets disappeared from trays faster than almost any other cafeteria offering. Their small size made them perfect for little hands and eliminated the mess of traditional corn dogs that dripped batter and condiments. Cafeteria workers could fry large batches quickly, keeping up with demand during busy lunch periods. The nuggets stayed warm and crispy longer than full-sized corn dogs, maintaining quality throughout extended service. Corn dog nuggets represented the cafeteria's ability to reimagine familiar foods into formats that better served institutional needs. Cheese Dreams were the open-faced grilled cheese sandwiches that cafeterias served when bread supplies needed stretching and children needed cheering. Slices of white bread were topped with American cheese and sometimes a thin tomato slice before being placed under commercial broilers until the cheese melted and developed brown spots. The bread underneath stayed soft while the cheese on top achieved a texture somewhere between melted and crispy. Served alongside tomato soup, Cheese Dreams created a combination that students associated with comfort and cold weather. The open-faced format meant each slice of bread supported a full portion of cheese rather than splitting it between two slices. Cafeteria ladies could prepare dozens simultaneously on large sheet pans, making Cheese Dreams efficient as well as popular. Some schools added bacon bits or diced ham beneath the cheese for protein. Cheese Dreams proved that cafeteria cooking could achieve genuine deliciousness with minimal ingredients and maximum care. Scalloped potatoes with ham cubes was the casserole that cafeteria ladies pulled out when they needed to feed hundreds with limited protein resources. Thin sliced potatoes were layered with cubed ham, onions, and white sauce in deep hotel pans, then baked until the top turned golden and the potatoes underneath became tender. The white sauce, made from butter, flour, and milk, transformed during baking into a creamy binding that held each portion together when served. Students discovered that the edges of the pan contained the best pieces, where potatoes had crisped against the metal while absorbing ham flavor. A little ham went a long way in this dish, with its smoky, salty taste permeating every layer of potato. The casserole could be prepared a day ahead and reheated without losing quality, making it perfect for busy cafeteria schedules. Scalloped potatoes with ham represented the institutional kitchen's mastery of stretching expensive protein into satisfying portions for all. Bread pudding with vanilla sauce was the dessert that transformed day-old bread into something magical through patient baking and proper technique. Cubed bread was soaked in a mixture of eggs, milk, sugar, and vanilla until every piece absorbed the custard, then poured into greased pans and baked slowly. During baking, the top pieces of bread turned golden and slightly crispy, while the interior became soft and custardy. Warm vanilla sauce made from butter, sugar, and milk was ladled over each portion, pooling in the crevices and adding richness. Students who initially resisted the unglamorous appearance were converted after tasting the creamy sweetness within. Cafeteria bakers added raisins, cinnamon, or nutmeg to their versions, creating signature recipes passed down through decades. The dessert exemplified waste-nothing philosophy, using bread that would otherwise be discarded. Bread pudding taught students that humble ingredients prepared with skill could become extraordinary desserts. Salisbury steak with mushroom gravy was the cafeteria's answer to fine dining, transforming ground beef into something that felt almost elegant. Seasoned beef patties were shaped to resemble small steaks, then pan-fried until browned on both sides before being smothered in rich mushroom gravy. The gravy was made from beef broth thickened with flour, studded with canned mushroom slices that added earthiness and visual appeal. Served alongside mashed potatoes or buttered noodles, this dish satisfied students who craved something more sophisticated than regular hamburgers. The patties were tender from the addition of breadcrumbs and egg, holding together perfectly when cut with a fork. Cafeteria ladies took pride in their Salisbury steak, adjusting seasonings to create signature versions that students recognized and requested. The mushroom gravy elevated the humble ground beef into territory that felt almost restaurant quality. Salisbury steak proved that institutional cooking could achieve refinement without sacrificing efficiency. Cinnamon rolls from scratch-filled cafeteria hallways with an aroma that announced something special was being served that morning. Yeast dough was rolled flat, spread with softened butter, and generously coated with cinnamon sugar before being rolled into logs and sliced. The individual rolls were placed in large sheet pans where they rose again before baking to golden perfection. Warm from the oven, each roll was drizzled with vanilla icing that melted into the crevices and pooled on the tray beneath. Students who arrived early on cinnamon roll days were rewarded with rolls still warm enough to steam when pulled apart. The combination of soft, pillowy dough with sweet cinnamon filling created a breakfast treat that rivaled any bakery offering. Cafeteria bakers often started before dawn to ensure the rolls were ready when students arrived. These weren't frozen convenience products, but genuine scratch baking that demonstrated real skill. Tater tot casserole combined convenience foods into something greater than the sum of its parts during the frozen food revolution. Ground beef was browned with onions and seasoned simply, then spread across the bottom of hotel pans before being covered with cream of mushroom soup straight from industrial-sized cans. Frozen tater tots were arranged in neat rows across the top, creating a uniform surface that baked to golden crispness while the meat mixture bubbled beneath. The tots absorbed some of the creamy sauce while maintaining their crunch, creating textural contrast in every bite. Students loved the familiar flavors combined in an unexpected format that felt both comforting and novel. The recipe required minimal skill and could be assembled in advance, making it perfect for busy cafeteria schedules. Tater tot casserole represented the era's embrace of convenience products while still delivering genuine satisfaction. Vegetable beef soup was the cafeteria's answer to using every scrap of food while creating something genuinely nourishing and delicious. Beef scraps and bones were simmered for hours to create rich broth. Then diced vegetables were added according to what was available in the walk-in cooler. Carrots, potatoes, celery, corn, green beans, and tomatoes joined the pot in varying combinations that made each batch unique. The soup simmered until vegetables were tender and flavors had melded into something deeply satisfying. Served with crackers or fresh rolls, a bowl of vegetable beef soup provided complete nutrition in liquid form. Students who felt under the weather often requested soup, knowing it would warm them through without requiring much effort to eat. Cafeteria ladies adjusted seasonings by taste, adding bay leaves, thyme, and pepper until the broth achieved proper depth. Vegetable beef soup exemplified the waste-nothing philosophy that defined institutional cooking at its best. Chicken patty sandwiches became the reliable protein option that appeared weekly on cafeteria menus throughout the decade. Breaded chicken patties arrived frozen and uniform, requiring only deep frying or baking before being placed on soft hamburger buns. The coating was seasoned with enough spice to make each bite interesting, while the chicken inside stayed moist despite industrial processing. Mayonnaise and shredded lettuce completed the sandwich, creating something familiar and satisfying for students who knew exactly what to expect. The consistency was the appeal, with every chicken patty sandwich tasting identical to the last. Students could count on this option when other menu items seemed too adventurous or unfamiliar. Cafeteria workers appreciated how quickly these sandwiches could be assembled during busy lunch rushes. Chicken patty sandwiches represented the industrialization of school food that prioritized efficiency while maintaining acceptable quality. Butterscotch pudding was the cafeteria dessert that proved scratch cooking could outperform any instant mix. Brown sugar was melted with butter until it developed deep caramel notes, then milk, eggs, and cornstarch were whisked in and cooked slowly until the mixture thickened into silky pudding. The from-scratch version had a richness that instant pudding could never match, with butterscotch flavor that actually tasted like butter and scotch. Poured into cups and chilled, the pudding developed a thin skin on top that some students loved and others carefully peeled away. Whipped cream or a vanilla wafer sometimes crowned each serving, adding textural contrast. Students traded other desserts for butterscotch pudding, recognizing its superiority. Cafeteria bakers took pride in their pudding, stirring constantly to prevent scorching. This dessert reminded everyone that patience and skill created flavors worth waiting for. Spanish rice accompanied many cafeteria entrees as a side dish that added color and flavor to otherwise plain plates. Long-grain rice was cooked with tomato sauce, diced onions, and green peppers until each grain absorbed the tangy red sauce completely. Seasonings like cumin and chili powder gave the rice warmth without overwhelming heat that might offend young palates. The rice could be prepared in enormous batches and held warm in steam tables for hours without losing quality. Served alongside enchiladas, tacos, or simply as a side to chicken dishes, Spanish rice provided carbohydrates with more personality than plain white rice. Students who initially viewed the red color with suspicion often became devoted fans after tasting its mild flavor. Cafeteria workers appreciated how Spanish rice stretched budgets while adding visual appeal. This side dish proved that simple preparations could transform ordinary ingredients. Oatmeal cookies with raisins were the chewy treats that cafeteria bakers produced in quantities that never seemed adequate for demand. Rolled oats were combined with butter, brown sugar, eggs, and flour to create cookies that were crisp at the edges and soft in the middle. Raisins studded each cookie, adding natural sweetness and chewiness that complemented the oat texture perfectly. Cinnamon and vanilla enhanced the homey flavor that made students think of grandmothers and warm kitchens. The cookies were substantial enough that one or two provided genuine satisfaction. Bakers mixed massive bowls of dough and dropped cookies onto sheet pans that rotated through commercial ovens. The smell of baking oatmeal cookies drifted through hallways, building anticipation for lunch. Oatmeal raisin cookies represented the kind of from-scratch baking that cafeterias once did routinely, but rarely attempt today. Hot dog boats were the creative presentation that made ordinary Frankfurters feel like something special on cafeteria trays. Hot dogs were split lengthwise and placed in soft buns that cradled them like small boats, then topped with chili, cheese, or onions depending on the day. The loaded hot dog satisfied bigger appetites than plain Franks while using the same basic ingredients in a more appealing format. Chili was ladled hot over the split dogs, followed by shredded cheddar that melted into the rich sauce. Some cafeterias offered a choice of toppings, letting students customize according to preference. The presentation made eating more fun, with students navigating the toppings without spilling onto their trays. Hot dog boats appeared regularly on menus when protein budgets were tight, but expectations remained high. This creative presentation proved that how food looked mattered as much as how it tasted. Apple crisp was the autumn dessert that cafeteria bakers prepared when fresh apples were affordable and students needed warming from the inside. Sliced apples were tossed with sugar and cinnamon, then spread in hotel pans before being topped with a crumbly mixture of oats, flour, butter, and brown sugar. During baking, the topping turned golden and crispy, while the apples beneath softened into tender, juicy fruit. The contrast between crunchy topping and soft filling made each bite interesting and deeply satisfying. Served warm with vanilla ice cream when budgets allowed, Apple Crisp became the dessert students anticipated all fall. The recipe was forgiving enough that even inexperienced bakers produced consistent results. Apple Crisp represented seasonal cooking at its best, using affordable ingredients at peak freshness. This dessert reminded students that simple preparations could achieve genuine deliciousness. American chop suey in a Tupperware bowl was the culinary equivalent of a shrug. Pasta, ground beef, tomato sauce, and whatever else your mom had lying around. It was not pretty, but it filled you up. The noodles were usually elbows, the meat was always overcooked, and the sauce was probably from a jar. Still, it had heart. It had the kind of comfort only a plastic lid could seal in. You would open it at lunch, and the steam would hit your face like a warm blanket that smelled like oregano. Some kids wrinkled their noses, others traded a fruit roll-up for a few bites. It was the kind of lunch that got better the longer it sat. Something about the way the noodles soaked up the sauce made it taste like home. And if it was cold, even better. You could fork it straight from the fridge and feel like a rebel. It was not Chinese. It was not Italian. It was just American. And it worked. Now this one came out of left field, unless you grew up near a Chinatown diner. The egg foo young sandwich was one of those things that made 0 cents on paper, but the second you took a bite, you stopped asking questions. Start with an egg patty, crispy on the outside, soft on the inside, and packed with bean sprouts, green onions, maybe a little chopped pork or shrimp if you got the good kind. Then came the gravy. Not just poured, but drenched. Thick brown gravy ladled right over the patty until it practically dripped off the sides. Slide the whole thing into a hamburger bun, close it up, and prepare yourself for the kind of meal that laughs in the face of napkins. It was heavy, hot, and heartwarming. The egg foo young sandwich felt like the kind of invention you only make when you are really hungry and just messing around in the kitchen. But in the 1970s, this was a lunchtime legend for anyone who knew where to find it. Of course, if you were not lucky enough to live near a place that served one of these, you probably grew up with something even saltier, way more military, and still showing up on diner menus today. As grim as the name might sound, peanut butter combined with mayo was quite a hit back in the day. In America, kids would often have this at 7 a.m. before school as breakfast they could easily put together. The sandwich was especially popular in the 30s to 60s as it was cheap and filling. Much like other sandwiches in the list, the peanut butter and mayo combination was also a product of the Great Depression. The mayo provided generous proteins that would pair well with fats from the peanut butter. In a time of financial instability, people found this sandwich to be a great way to ensure intake of important nutrients. As financial situations improved in America, this sandwich was replaced by newer and rather better tasting options. The chow mein sandwich was chaos held together by 2 buns, and somehow it worked. Born in southeastern Massachusetts, this Frankenstein creation placed a mound of crispy chow mein noodles smothered in thick brown gravy between 2 hamburger buns. The result was a crunchy, savory, totally illogical meal that became a school lunch staple in some corners of the country. Kids would unwrap their foil-wrapped mystery and find a puddle of sauce and starch that somehow filled every craving and left fingers coated in grease. This was the kind of sandwich you could not eat neatly, and that was half the fun. The noodles poked out the sides, the sauce soaked into the bread, and no two bites were ever the same. The chow mein sandwich was a lunchtime dare wrapped in cultural mashup, a reminder that not all great foods make perfect sense on paper. Over time, regional oddities like this one gave way to standardization. One bite, and you were somewhere between comfort food and total confusion. And somehow that felt exactly right. Olive loaf on rye was your mom's attempt at sophistication, whether you asked for it or not. It looked like bologna, until you noticed the green pimento-stuffed olives embedded like some kind of edible mosaic. The meat was pink, the olives were green, and the whole sandwich smelled like a deli had gotten lost in a thrift store. Rye bread made it even fancier, with its dense texture and sharp tang. But kids did not care about fancy. They cared about not getting laughed at, and bringing olive loaf to school was social suicide. Still, it had its defenders. Kids who genuinely liked the odd mix of salty meat and briny olives. Maybe they were ahead of their time. Maybe they just had weird taste buds. Either way, they stood by it. You could find olive loaf in plastic lunchboxes next to Capri Suns and string cheese. It held its own in a world of peanut butter and jelly. It was bold. It was unapologetic. And most of all, it was forgotten. Today, even deli counters hesitate to carry it. But back then, it was a declaration. My mom shops at the nice grocery store. There is nothing tidy about a sloppy Joe, and that is the whole point. These school cafeteria icons had one mission: to hit like a flavor bomb and leave a trail behind. Tangy ground beef cooked with tomato paste, onions, and whatever seasoning the lunch lady felt like using that day. Scooped in a steaming pile onto soft hamburger buns that were usually a little too small. You would take one bite, and the filling would slide out the other side like it was trying to escape. Your hands? Covered. Your tray? A disaster. Your smile? Huge. They were sweet, salty, savory, and just chaotic enough to make lunch feel like a party. Even the name sounded like something you should not be allowed to say in class. Sloppy Joes were not reserved for fancy moments. They were served with plastic forks and half a chocolate milk carton. But they became legendary. Maybe it was because they tasted like comfort food mixed with rebellion. Or maybe it was just the fact that no one ever got through one without needing extra napkins. Either way, it earned its place in the Sandwich Hall of Fame. But what if I told you there was a sandwich out there that combined egg, gravy, and a hamburger bun, and somehow made it work? Spam and pineapple sandwiches, on the other hand, are a Hawaiian invention that makes some stomachs less audible. On the other hand, if you are anything like us, then maybe the blend of spices, fruits, and canned pork and ham will create a unique flavor trip for you. Spam and pineapple sandwiches in the state of Hawaii would usually be accompanied with things like mango slices or mango chutney, peppers, chili pastes, and fresh coleslaw. All of this really elevated the dish and gave it a strong identity to pull from when it was making impressions on people for the first time in the 70s, and most were good ones. While pineapples are eternally hated in America, this is one mix of different foods that a lot of citizens could get in line for, and that is why we are sad to see this one gone. The bologna and ketchup sandwich was the lunchroom underdog, a squishy, no-frills sandwich that somehow earned its place among childhood favorites. It was cheap, fast, and unapologetically plain. A slice or two of bologna, straight from the fridge, slapped onto soft sandwich bread, and dressed with a squirt of ketchup. That was it. No lettuce, no cheese, no frills. But in its simplicity was something oddly satisfying. The bologna was smooth and salty. The ketchup added tang and sweetness. The bread held it all together like a peace treaty between convenience and hunger. It showed up in mid-century lunchboxes packed by parents who needed to stretch a budget and feed a family. Kids would open their bags, see that red smear pressed through the plastic wrap, and know exactly what to expect. There was no surprise, and somehow that was comforting. It was a sandwich that never pretended to be more than it was, and maybe that is why it stuck around as long as it did. You rarely see them now, lost in a sea of organic spreads and artisanal fillings. It came in a little metal tin with a key you had to crank open like a can of paint, and inside was a pinkish meat paste that somehow became the crown jewel of school lunches across the country. Deviled ham sandwiches on Wonder Bread were the kind of thing your mom would pack with the same confidence as someone handing you a gold bar. It was salty, it was tangy, and it had that uncanny ability to smell up the entire lunchroom in 5 seconds flat. There was no middle ground. You either prayed for a trade or guarded it like it was national treasure. And let us not forget the bread. Wonder Bread, so white and soft it almost melted when you touched it. It was less of a sandwich and more of an edible napkin wrapped around a meat mystery. Kids today could not even imagine something like this being edible, let alone desirable. But back then, it was what you looked forward to after recess. It was what reminded you that even if you forgot your homework, at least your lunch was unforgettable. Somehow, deviled ham became a status symbol for a very specific kind of childhood chaos. Now this one had drama. The tuna boat melt was not just a sandwich, it was an event. You start with a sub roll, soft in the middle, split open like it is waiting for a miracle. In goes a scoop of tuna salad, but not the watery kind. This was chunky, mayo-rich, maybe with a little celery if you were lucky. Then come the tomato slices, thin, juicy, and laid down like armor. And finally, cheddar cheese, shredded, sliced, whatever worked, blanketing the whole thing like a warm hug. Slide the whole sandwich under a broiler and wait. That is the moment things change. The edges of the bread crisp up, the cheese bubbles and browns, and the tomato softens just enough to soak into the tuna. You pull it out just in time to stop it from burning, but almost wish it had. This was the sandwich version of comfort food theater. It smelled like warmth. It looked like golden perfection. It tasted like something way fancier than it was. Parents made it to use up tuna, but kids remembered it like a feast. But if this one was golden, wait until you meet the sandwich that vanished from lunch counters just as fast as it appeared. Sliced bananas with mayo on white bread. This banana and mayonnaise sandwich is a bit of a wild card for sure, but keep an open mind because the South definitely does, which is where this interesting creation finds its origins. Typically, a lot of comfort food comes out of the southern USA. As you may have guessed, preparing this is as simple as taking candy from a toddler. Now I know what you're thinking. Bananas and mayo sounds worse than water and oil. However, there's a reason it comes into comfort food. All you need is a sliced banana, 2 slices of fresh bread, and a good spread of mayo. Maybe not the best you'll ever have, but what's the downside? Give this forgotten experiment a try and see if it's up your alley. Fluffer Nutters were the sugar bombs of childhood, smeared between slices of Wonder Bread like sticky little secrets. Made from peanut butter and marshmallow creme, this New England classic was as sweet as the recess bell and just as anticipated. No meat, no veggies, just a sugary swirl that glued your sandwich shut and made your fingers tacky with every bite. The texture was half the fun. Soft bread, gooey center, and that unmistakable stretch of marshmallow when you pulled the halves apart. They were a staple of elementary school lunch tables, always wrapped in plastic and slightly flattened from being stuffed into a backpack. Every bite tasted like skipping spelling tests and drawing dinosaurs in the margins of your notebook. The Fluffer Nutter was not subtle, it was not sophisticated, but it made you feel like you were getting away with something. Over time, it disappeared from school menus and fell out of fashion, replaced by yogurts and wraps and grown-up meals for tiny hands. Hot dog pie was what happened when dinner and lunch collided in the middle of a very questionable casserole dish. It was part mystery, part meat, and all nostalgia. Imagine cutting into a pie crust expecting apples and finding chopped up hot dogs swimming in a sea of onion, ketchup, and maybe a few rogue vegetables. It should have been horrifying, but to kids in the 1970s, it was a warm hug from a world that did not know what cholesterol was. Moms made it when they had too many leftovers and no energy. Dads ate it like it was steak. And kids? Kids bragged about having it cold in their lunchboxes the next day. It was savory, sloppy, and full of heart. Not culinary heart, just the metaphorical kind. Every forkful was a gamble. Would you hit more meat or more mush? Did it matter? Probably not. All that mattered was that it felt homemade. It felt like someone tried. Even if that someone was making dinner out of the last 5 hot dogs, a can of cream of mushroom soup, and a dream. Today, it sounds like a fever dream. Back then, it was a Tuesday. The patty melt was not just a sandwich, it was a lifestyle. It belonged to truck stops, corner booths, and places where the waitress calls you hon. Start with a beef patty, not too thick, not too thin, grilled until the edges charred just enough. Then pile on caramelized onions so sweet they practically melt, and drop a couple of slices of Swiss cheese on top until it oozes over like lava. But the crown jewel? That rye bread, buttered and toasted right on the griddle. It soaked up everything. The beefy drippings, the onion sweetness, the crispy edges of the cheese. Every bite was a perfect mix of crunchy and gooey, salty and buttery. You were not just eating a sandwich, you were biting into pure diner energy. People had this at lunch and still talked about it at dinner. If your parents ever made this at home, you were one of the lucky ones. And if not, you probably still remember your first time trying one and realizing a sandwich could actually stop time. But not every sandwich needed to be hot off the grill. Some came cold, weirdly fancy, and straight from the pages of a church cookbook. If you've ever walked the streets of downtown New York, I'm sure you're familiar with the infamous pastrami on rye. If your grandma's from the Big Apple, chances are her recipe is highly regarded. This sandwich became a staple in Jewish delis in the late 19th and early 20th centuries, thanks to Eastern European immigrants. This one just featured an old-fashioned slice of pastrami on rye bread and a dollop of mustard. Grandma knew that when it came to sandwiches, sometimes less is more, and pastrami on rye is the perfect example of that. But hey, don't forget no pastrami on rye is complete without a pickle on the side. The tartness of a dill pickle or the sweetness of a bread and butter pickle is the perfect contrast to the savory pastrami. The lettuce sandwich was what you got when there was nothing else, and yet it became something more. Just 2 slices of bread and a few crisp leaves in between, maybe with a swipe of butter or a dusting of salt if someone was feeling generous. It was minimalist, it was plain, but in a strange way, it was also pure. In the early 20th century, when meat was a luxury and refrigeration was not guaranteed, the lettuce sandwich became a reliable go-to. It was light, refreshing, almost delicate in a time when food was anything but. Packed into school lunches, it was easy to make, hard to mess up, and always surprising in how much it satisfied. Kids might groan, but they still ate it, and maybe even liked it. Over time, it faded into punchlines and parody, replaced by protein-heavy, sauce-drenched monsters that took 3 napkins to conquer. But the lettuce sandwich was never trying to impress. It was just trying to get the job done. And sometimes, that was enough. Jell-O salad with shredded carrots was a betrayal that somehow got passed off as a side dish for decades. It looked like dessert and tasted like confusion. Your fork would go in expecting sweetness and come out with carrot bits clinging to neon green gelatin. No one knows who started it. Some say it came from the church potluck crowd. Others swear it was a prank gone too far. Either way, it ended up on cafeteria trays and family tables alike. You could not escape it. Lime Jell-O was the most common offender, but there were worse versions: orange, lemon, and the truly cursed cherry with celery. Moms called it a salad, so you would eat it. But there was no lettuce, no dressing, just the jiggling horror of a dessert that desperately wanted to be a vegetable. It was served with pride, too. People molded it into rings, decorated it with pineapple slices, and acted like it was gourmet. You had to pretend to like it, not out of politeness, but because the grown-ups genuinely thought it was good. It was one of the strangest culinary gaslights of the 20th century. And somehow, it stuck. You know it is serious when your childhood lunch starts with a loud sizzle. Fried bologna and mustard was never supposed to be a star. It was just something people made when they ran out of ideas or groceries. But it had that wild card charm. Thick-cut bologna, the kind with that red plastic skin you had to peel off, got tossed on a hot skillet until it puffed like a mini volcano. It would curl at the edges, crispy and brown, and just when you thought it was done, it would start to sing. Slap that onto a slice of Wonder Bread, squeeze on yellow mustard like you mean it, and top it with another slice. No lettuce, no tomato, no distractions. This was the sandwich that knew what it was. It smelled like school lunches and weekend trips to the lake. It was cheap, easy, and always hit the spot. Nobody was trying to impress anybody with this, but somehow it never let you down. The meat might have been humble, but it had attitude, and the mustard made sure it got noticed. Now, if that one felt like a memory, wait until we talk about the sandwich that brought the diner straight to your house, griddle grease and all. Olives might not make a comeback anytime soon in today's world, but they will return on the list with egg and olive sandwiches. Like we said, olives were starting to get really hot as the ideal sandwich topping. Adaptable, flexible, and cheap is all you want out of an accessory to your sandwich. Like those fancy earrings that go perfect with your dress, olives and eggs went together like a Cupid-certified match made in heaven. People went wild around the mid-1970s for hard-boiled eggs and salted olives in their sandwich, green or black. Black olives got a bit more traction with eggs though, whereas greens synergized better with peanut butter. Would you ever try a sandwich that consists only of an egg and a fruit? By the way, you did know olives are fruits, right? The tuna and cream cheese sandwich was what your grandmother made when she wanted to feed you something fancy that was also suspiciously efficient. It was a relic from the 1940s, a time when mayonnaise was not the only binder in town and lemon juice felt like fine dining. Chilled tuna blended with cream cheese, a touch of citrus, and sometimes even crushed pecans or chopped celery. This sandwich wore a pressed napkin and gave off a whiff of Sunday brunch in the cafeteria. Kids either loved it or politely folded it back into the sandwich bag and focused on their chocolate milk instead. The bread was often buttered, soft, and crustless if someone was feeling generous. What made this sandwich stick in the mind was its smoothness, its unexpected tang, and how it seemed to signal that whoever packed your lunch had a plan. This was not a slapdash peanut butter job. This was intentional. Over time, tuna salad took the spotlight and cream cheese retreated to bagels and frosting. But in lunchboxes from another era, it played a surprisingly elegant role. SpaghettiOs in a thermos were never hot. That was the unspoken truth everyone knew, but no one dared admit. They started hot, sure, bubbling on the stove in that cheerful red can. But by lunchtime, they were lukewarm at best, trapped in a metal container that always smelled slightly like old soup. And yet, those lukewarm pasta rings were magic. A swirling alphabet of childhood comfort, swirling in that iconic orange-red sauce. It was not Italian food, it was not even pasta really. It was SpaghettiOs, and that was enough. Kids would open their thermos with a dramatic twist, steam barely rising, and proudly take a spoonful like it was gourmet. Because it was not just about taste, it was about ritual, about having something warm in a sea of cold sandwiches, about having a lunch that made you feel like home followed you to school. You knew you would burn your tongue on the first bite and still go in anyway. It was worth it. Even when the sauce stained your shirt or your spoon got lost at the bottom of the thermos, you would do it again and again. If you were a regular at lunch counters in the 1970s, there was one cold cut that had a mysterious charm: pickle and pimento loaf. It had a look that was hard to ignore. A pale pink meat dotted with bright green pickle bits and tiny flecks of red pimento, like a mosaic made by someone who really loved sandwiches. It came sliced thin from behind the deli glass, slapped between white bread with a dab of mayonnaise, and wrapped in wax paper with a soda on the side. You did not question it. You just ate it. The flavor? Tangy, savory, and weirdly sweet, but not in a bad way. It had the texture of bologna, the bite of pickle, and the color scheme of a Christmas tree. For some reason, it vanished from most grocery shelves by the end of the decade. Maybe tastes changed, or maybe we just stopped putting pickles inside our meat. But back then, it was an easy go-to, a bit of fun, and a total conversation starter if you pulled it out during lunch break. Of course, if you thought that sandwich was messy looking, just wait until we dive into the one that was literally impossible to eat without getting sauce all over your hands and loving it. You have not seen experimental until you have seen a tuna and apple sandwich. Exactly what it sounds like and worse in reality than in your imagination, a tuna salad mixed with chopped apple slices on white bread. Yes, that is literally the entire concept. And no matter what the fusion food crowd tries to say, we are not trying it or buying into the hype. If only to satisfy the curiosity inside us and scratch that must-try-everything itch would we want this back. But strangely, people in the 70s had the opposite opinion. Cans of Pink Lady tuna and farmers market apples were apparently their idea of a good meal back then. Do you think they were onto something? Maybe we are jumping the gun and should take a note out of their book about being open to new tastes. Peanut butter and pickle sandwiches were the lunchbox legends nobody admits to loving, but many still secretly miss. Born out of the Great Depression, this odd pairing was less about culinary boldness and more about making do with what was left in the pantry. Peanut butter was cheap, packed with protein, and shelf-stable. Pickles added crunch, tang, and just enough bite to wake up plain white bread. Somehow, the combination worked. The sweet creaminess of the peanut butter and the sharp, vinegary snap of a dill or bread and butter pickle created a balance that stayed with you, whether you liked it or not. These sandwiches were slipped into wax paper and handed off like rationed gold. Some kids traded them. Others guarded them with their lives. They were cheap, they were weird, and they were unforgettable. As the decades rolled on and lunch menus got glossier, peanut butter and pickle sandwiches faded from view. It might not win a gourmet prize today, but back then, it was a masterpiece made from struggle and stubbornness. Peanut butter and bacon sandwiches were what happened when your parents wanted to show off a little. Elvis Presley supposedly ate them by the dozen, which gave them some sort of mythical cool factor. But even without the king's endorsement, they were the kind of lunch that made you feel like royalty. Greasy, sticky royalty. The peanut butter glued everything together, while the bacon gave it that crunch you could hear 2 tables over. Sweet, salty, and absolutely heart-stopping. Literally. This was not diet food. This was your mom was feeling generous food. Served on white bread, maybe toasted if she had time, it was the sandwich version of getting away with something. You were not supposed to eat bacon for lunch. You were definitely not supposed to drown it in peanut butter. And yet, there it was, crammed into a sandwich bag and sweating by noon. By the time lunch rolled around, the bacon was soggy, the peanut butter had oozed out the sides, and it was still somehow perfect. Nobody makes them anymore. Maybe that is for the best. But once upon a time, it was the king of brown bag lunches. If breakfast and lunch ever had a baby, it would probably look like the Denver sandwich. And no, this has nothing to do with Colorado. It just happens to be the name that stuck. Picture this: chopped ham, bell peppers, and onions folded into a golden omelet, then squished between 2 slices of toasted white bread that crackle at the corners. It was the kind of meal that rolled straight off a diner griddle and onto your plate with no apologies. There was no syrup, no fancy garnish, just a sandwich that worked as hard as you did. People on their way to double shifts or cranking their station wagon heaters on winter mornings lived for this. It was breakfast without needing a plate, a fork, or even a break in your morning routine. The egg made it feel like something your mom would cook, while the sandwich form made it fast enough to eat one-handed while pumping gas. Somehow both comforting and chaotic, it became a regular in greasy spoons across the country. You could smell it before it even hit the table. And while the Denver sandwich was bold, our next one turned cheap meat into high art, or at least into something that sizzled like it mattered. Ham and banana sandwiches are less digestible both literally and figuratively than most of the list, but they actually worked quite well. The trick was in how you sliced them, because if the banana slices were fat and thick while the ham was thin, you would have a really overly sweet sandwich. Meanwhile, if you did the opposite, then you would have a mushy sandwich that did not have any real flavor. If you did get the proportions right, and most people did after their first few tries, then you had a 70s DIY delicacy with simple ingredients. It made sense why most people did not know how to make a good one, because it was not common. People who lived in other decades hated fruit and meat mixes of savory dishes, but they had a lot more room to make an impression with the crowd in the 70s. Maybe people felt very tropical for a decade? The sandwich would be quite an interesting addition in menus today. Vienna sausages and saltines were not a meal. They were a dare. Tiny pink tubes floating in mystery juice, packed into a can that hissed when you opened it, like it knew it was about to be judged. You would drain them, maybe pat them dry, and line them up like little soldiers on a stack of saltines. No heat, no fuss, just raw, salty commitment. The crackers softened under the weight of the sausages, sometimes crumbling entirely. But you powered through because this was your lunch, and if you were lucky, there was mustard. Not fancy mustard. Yellow squeeze bottle stuff that cut through the meat-flavored monotony. It was not gourmet, it was survival. A lunch built for kids who knew how to eat without complaining. And maybe, just maybe, you started to like it. Maybe the weirdness became comforting, like knowing you could always count on something so unapologetically odd to be waiting in your lunchbox. Kids today would never touch them. But back then, they were a rite of passage. Which school cafeteria recipe brings back your fondest memories? Drop your answer in the comments, hit that like button, and subscribe so you never miss another trip down memory lane.